Alabamians with low and moderate incomes pay a higher share of their incomes in state and local taxes than the wealthiest households, and high sales taxes, particularly on food, are a major reason why.
Which side are you on? Which side are you on?
Some good news on the state grocery tax front, though, right?
Yeah, there is some decent news, I guess you could say. Alabama Rise just put out a statement, I believe yesterday, day before, perhaps. And so Senator Andrew Jones, who is a Republican from Center Alabama, he has filed legislation this week to reduce Alabama's state sales tax on groceries. And the interesting thing about it is this bill, which is SB 257, is co-sponsored by all 35 state senators. So I mean, that's kind of amazing in itself that literally all 35 state senators would agree to co-sponsor one single bill.
Yeah.
Alabama Rise Executive Director Robin Hayden released the following statement Friday in response. Alabama Rise is thrilled to see widespread bipartisan support from every senator for reducing the state sales tax on groceries. We support Senator Andrew Jones's legislation and appreciate the leadership that he and Rep. Penny McClammy have shown on this issue. It's time for lawmakers to seize this opportunity to untax groceries and improve life for every Alabamian. Reducing and ultimately eliminating the state grocery tax would make it easier for families to make ends meet. It would remove Alabama from the shameful list of 3 states with no tax break on groceries. It would also be an important step toward righting the wrongs of our state's upside-down tax system. Alabamians with low and moderate incomes pay a higher share of their incomes in state and local taxes than the wealthiest households, and high sales taxes, particularly on food, are a major reason why. Quite simply, there are better ways for Alabama to raise revenue than taxing a necessity of life. It will be important, however, to ensure any grocery tax cut doesn't harm our children's education in the long term. The state grocery tax brings in more than $600 million a year for the Education Trust Fund. That's about 7% of this year's total ETF budget, making it a significant funding source for public schools. Revenues are likely strong enough for now to reduce the state grocery tax without causing severe harm to education funding, but history tells us that good economic times won't last forever. Lawmakers should use the coming months to identify and agree to a lasting solution to replace the state grocery tax. Arise is open to numerous ideas for replacement revenue. We continue to support Senator Marika Coleman's proposal to untax groceries and end the state income tax deduction for federal income tax payments. Alabama is the only state to allow this full deduction, which overwhelmingly benefits wealthy households. Closing this skewed loophole would protect funding for public schools and ensure Alabama can afford to end the state sales tax on groceries forever. Alabama Rise members have advocated for decades to end the state grocery tax, and the people of Alabama strongly support this effort. The time for excuses and delays is over. It's time for our lawmakers to untax groceries. So that was from Robin Hayden, Executive Director of Alabama Rise, which is a statewide member-led nonprofit organization advancing public policies to improve the lives of Alabamians who are marginalized by poverty. And Arise's membership includes faith-based, community, nonprofit, and civic groups, grassroots leaders, and individuals from across Alabama. They have been doing a lot of hard work on this very issue of untaxing groceries. But I do appreciate that in Robin's statement, she made it clear that we have to look out for education funding as well. Mm-hmm. And that has been one of the issues that has prevented the grocery tax cut from being implemented so far. And frankly, it looks to me like there's not a lot of demand right now in the legislature to replace any of the revenue that they're cutting.
Yeah.
They're cutting revenue left and right, tax cuts left and right. Tax cuts that are disproportionately not helping us working people. Mm-hmm. Last year, there were tens of millions of dollars worth of cuts that were made that comes out of the Education Trust Fund. This year, there's a lot more that's being proposed and looks to go through. So as we have said on this show numerous times, the grocery tax is just totally uncalled for. We shouldn't tax groceries. and it disproportionately hurts poor people. But at the same time, we shouldn't cut education funding just to do that. And I think it's important that we lift up all workers. And that's what bothers me, is our politicians always give us these false choices, that we have to hurt one group of workers to help another group of workers, and vice versa. But what about not doing that?
Right.
What about not screwing over working people?
Yeah.
What about helping all working people better afford their groceries and protecting schools and educators and students? Seems like something we can do. It's something we should do. So there's good news on the grocery tax front. It does look like it's more likely than ever to be repealed, and that's good news for us working people. The not so good news is we're not sure if any of that money is going to be replaced for our schools, and so obviously that's a huge chunk. 7% of the budget. That's people's jobs.
Yeah.
That's class sizes. That's resources available for students. That's projects to fix the playground and paint the school and you name it. So it's a complicated issue. Happy to see movement on the grocery tax repeal, but I am as a former educator, and I'm just very concerned about all these cuts that are happening to the Education Trust Fund. Because there's more money than normal this year in the budget, everybody's wanting to just cut left and right and take out taxes, and it's gonna catch up with us. It absolutely will, and that's what worries me, is that we have an austerity on the way.
And one of the things that is most disappointing, and we mentioned this last time, is that among the people who is giving this argument air that we don't need to replace the funding explicitly is the leader of the Democrats in the House, Anthony Daniels. He is just, giving credence to this argument that, maybe if we cut this tax on groceries, then the money will just appear magically somehow, somewhere.
Right. And the thing is, of course there will be some stimulus effect, but the idea that it will create enough taxable revenue to replace it seems
just
silly. And worth noting on that front that Anthony Daniels' overtime tax cut bill is moving through the legislature. It got a favorable report. It got a lot of praise from Republicans and Democrats, both calling it innovative and groundbreaking and all this. And there again, I think it would be good to reduce the taxes on overtime pay. If you work hard, you work enough hours, and you're away from your family long enough to earn overtime pay, getting a little bit of a tax break on that would be nice. Right. But it's also millions and millions out of the Education Trust Fund that will no longer appear. And again, that's you're helping one set of workers, but what about all the workers who never make it to overtime because they're working 2 or 3 jobs to make ends meet, right? There's a lot of folks who are not allowed to get more than 40 hours at their job. Mm-hmm. That's a very common thing for workers to not be allowed to get overtime. So
yeah, and the idea sometimes not every bill is going to be able to positively impact every single group of folks, and I understand that, and that's okay. But the biggest thing for me is the again not replacing the revenue.
Yeah, they've leaned real hard on the tax cut side of things.
Yeah,
and basically
and the
they've
idea
said
that you couldn't yes, okay, cut the tax for overtime pay, and let's replace that revenue with a tax on profits or something.
Right.
On capital gains, on people who are making money off of owning money. The idea, and that would be good, because that is already taxed at a much lower rate than labor is, which is just an insane kind of thing to think about. The reality that you are taxed more on the sweat of your brow than your boss is on their capital gains,
right?
On the profits from owning things.
Yeah.
It's just
That's
insulting.
my concern with the Alabama Democrats is that they have found some common ground on certain tax cuts with Republicans. You know, hey, Republicans, you love to cut taxes. How about we cut taxes for regular people? Okay, you know, fair enough. But they haven't paired that with any sort of plan to make up that revenue and to prevent austerity down the road. They are not pushing for the FIT plan that Arise is pushing for. Some of them are, like Senator Coleman, but, you know, I haven't seen Anthony Daniels write an op-ed on how we need to raise revenue, how we need to tax the wealthy in loopholes that benefit the wealthy, such as the FIT, the federal income tax deduction. We could get rid of that, and very few people would notice it. Only the wealthiest people would notice it. What about property? Alabama has some of the lowest property taxes in the state, in particular, land that is classified as quote-unquote timber. And so that's like the real one that they're never going to want to touch, because then you start looking at some of the most wealthy, powerful interests in the state, including the out-of-state interests who own much of this quote-unquote timberland. You know, I don't get why, you know, land that across the border in Georgia is going to be taxed higher than in Alabama. The exact same land, the same piece of property, right, could span across the state line, and they would pay a little bit more in tax in Georgia. It's just, but it's one of those things that it may help. It may help having these tax cuts for working people in terms of our overtime pay and in terms of our grocery bill. But there are consequences if it's not paired with any new revenue sources. Alabama already has the second lowest amount of revenue raised in the country. Only Tennessee raises less in taxes, and Tennessee actually raises more if you factor in the lottery, because we don't have a lottery. We don't have casino gambling.
Right.
We don't have sports betting. And all those we don't have legal marijuana. Those are all, you know, sources of revenue for other states around us that Alabama refuses to engage in, because if Alabama raises revenue, they might, maybe, just maybe, have to spend it to help regular people.
Yeah.
And of course, that's the biggest no-no in the state.
You just saw a clip from the Valley Labor Report. We are live every Saturday morning from 9:30 a.m. till 12:30 p.m. And we pride ourselves on keeping all of our content free to everybody so that we can talk to as many working folks as possible. If you support the work that we're doing, you think that it's important, you think that it's good, then consider making a monthly contribution to the project, and you can do that on our website, tvlr.fm.